And we're back.
Hey, Brian.
Hello.
Long time no see.
John, when was I at the salon, the studio in San Francisco? Was that in March?
I think it was March. And now everything's opening up, so you got to come back.
Yes. Time is flying. Hello, everybody. John and I take this as time with you, of course, with our special guests, and also with each other, because the weeks fly by so quickly that this is our catch-up time as well. Well, everybody, welcome to Intersections. I guess we'll just jump right in because our guest is already here backstage. So I'll just do the official welcome and then introduce our first guest. But before I do, I just wanted to say thank you. John and I are very fortunate that we get to spend this time with you every week. And John, thank you for holding down the show again last week while I was pulled into some customer sessions. So with that said, welcome officially to Intersections. It's our weekly conversational jam session that dives deep into the intersections among technology, innovation, culture, and ideas. Our goal is to bring diverse personalities and worldviews together in the service of greater understanding and, most importantly, unlearning to learn forward. My co-host and co-founder, John Kao, is a special human being, one of the brightest, smartest, and most just sweetest people that I know. It's an absolute pleasure to host this show with him every week. The Economist has called him Mr. Creativity and a serial innovator. He is a Tony-nominated producer of film and stage. He wrote the best-selling Jamming: The Art and Discipline of Business Creativity. He's also taught at Harvard Business School. I've seen a lot of his work in terms of textbooks. I've met some of his students, and it is. And also to hear about the network of people that he works with and advises, from well-known government officials to some of the biggest businesses in the world to world leaders. Mr. John Kao, welcome to Intersections.
Hey, Brian. Thank you for the generous and fulsome introduction. Allow me to reciprocate. Brian is kind of the innovation twin that I've been looking for all these years. He and I are both obsessed about innovation. We have complementary perspectives, professional experiences. He's working in a big company and I'm not, for example. But he also brings an enormous amount of expertise in the whole digital domain. I mean, before digital was even a thing, Brian was writing about digital and marketing, digital and social, digital and innovation and evangelizing for these ideas, which is why he has a day job, as I just referenced a moment ago, which is Global Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce. So here we are.
And here we are. And with that said, I want to go ahead and introduce our first guest, Mr. Hank Wasiak. Hank is actually someone, if I could get my cursor here to work, someone that is, I'm going to just do this here so that it operates normally. There we go. Gregarious, I'm not sure, our producer, if he's multitasking, but I'm just going to add Hank directly to this screen right now. Hank, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
What's up? How are you guys doing?
Good.
Well, we're doing all right. I mean, I'm just going to give you the formal introduction that I have here, and then we'll just jump right in because your resume is impressive, but also you are a dear friend, Hank. We've known each other for way too many years than I want to count. But I've learned so much from you over the years. You're the co-founder of Concept Farm, an award-winning digital agency. You're an author. You have a new book which we'll talk about. You're an Emmy Award winner. You're a keynote speaker. You're a university professor at University of Southern California's Marshall School of Business. I've had the distinct pleasure of joining your class, meeting your students, which has been amazing. They always continue to impress me. I see their work online. Hank, welcome to Intersections.
Thank you very, very much. And the other thing that I am, to quote you, Brian, is I'm a human being. Behind all of that is a person. And we tend to lose sight of that all the time.
We do.
We do. And it's great to be with John. I just am just in awe of all the work that you've done. It's amazing. The more I learn about you, the more time I want to spend with you. And Brian, you said we've been friends for a while. And to pick up what John said, Brian was the person that was my mentor to get me into the digital world, coming from the traditional media world. And that was a number of years ago, before it was cool, man. And we were doing a lot together. And you taught me, so I owe you an awful lot, and I really appreciate it. And you are so generous with my class. You're there for me all the time. And John, now that I have you, I'm sure next semester or two you're gonna opt in for a guest lecture as well sometime.
Well, sometimes I get nostalgic for the halls of academe, having inhabited them for quite a while. So maybe I'll get that nostalgia again.
That's great. It's great to be with you. I'm coming to you, by the way, from my Palm Springs campus. We've been on Zoom for the last year and a half.
I was going to ask if you were coming in from Palm Springs.
Oh man, I've been on Zoom. That's an experience. I could talk to you about what that's been like for the last year or so. It's really been interesting.
I could only imagine, especially we had Erica Dawal on a couple of weeks ago. Gosh, it just seems like yesterday. She's the author of Digital Body Language, and she talked about how basically we have to reimagine our complete interactions because of this digital first world. And she talked about how reading an email, for example, was the new art of listening. And I thought that was so incredible because we have to give a little bit more of ourselves in order to break that fourth wall, I guess is a good way to put it. But that's why why Zoom fatigue is a real thing. But Hank, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm going to dive in, and John, I might turn it over to you because I actually see somebody outside my door, and I'm not exactly sure what that is. Interesting
Welcome to the world of new media.
Absolutely.
I hope it's not an intruder.
Yeah, we'll find out. You guys you speed dial 911 just in case. But Hank, I'll start. So you have a new book, and I'd like to. I mean, you have many books, and you've been one of the most creative minds. Also, one of the most humble people I know. But when you get going, man, do you inspire? So your new book is From Madman to Happy Farmer: 55 Years of Sage Advice from a Marketing Guru Still Crazy About the Ad Biz. So tell us about the book and the story behind it, Hank.
Well, the story, as I said, I've written a couple of other books. I co-authored a couple of books with a great psychologist and business coach, Dr. Kathy Kramer, and it was on a thing called ASSET, ASSET, asset-based thinking and the power of positivity, and we translated that into business and marketing, and it was a great book and a great experience. And my dear friend Kathy has left us, but her spirit lives on in everything that I do, and especially in the book. So I've always wanted to add that other book in me. Sometimes a lot of us always do, and I've been thinking about it, and in teaching one of my classes, one of my students, a bright young woman called Izzy Sellon, had a project that she had to do for one of her classes, which was interview someone that has had an interesting career, and then report on it for their class in a live video. So she chose me. I was honored that she did. And she said, I have 15 minutes, let's talk about it. And I started to give her my story. And about an hour and a half later, we were finished. And Izzy, looked at me and she said, this is a great story, Hank. You should, let's spend the class, tell the class about that. And then I thought, what the heck? Why don't I tell the world about it? And she was the one that gave me the push and the kick in the butt to do what I've been wanting to do. So that's how I got to the book. And it's a really interesting three-parter, as I say. It's a career memoir. So it takes a insightful look at my career from February 1965 to today. And it's a longitudinal look at the marketing business, particularly the ad business. And I'm still in it today. And so I have a very, very different and interesting perspective than most people you'll see in this business. And it is the good and the bad and the ugly of all of that. And then what I extracted from those, each chapter has a a section that is my, advice, things I learned from what you just read about. And then I take also the things that I was involved in from a marketing point of view, and I create a tips section, marketing tips section at the end of each chapter. So it's a multifunctional book that way. I made it interactive. I put QR codes in it for the print version and links. I have a website with it. So when I talk about, for example, being involved in the Mr. Whipple campaign for Charmin, I have a link to the original commercials that we worked on. So it's very interactive. It was a thrill to write. It took 18 months. And man, it was a journey, and it was a cathartic journey. God, did I learn a lot more about myself than I ever thought. And so that's how I got there. And the other thing it did is it made me appreciate, Brian, and you and I talk about this all the time, how wonderful life is, and how you have so many mentors and people that touch you that you sometimes take for granted, often take for granted and don't appreciate. And it just resurrected all of that in me. And my writing partner, Kathy, had a little saying she always used to say to me was, live your legacy now, Hank. Don't leave a legacy. So this is part of that. So I loved it, and it's been a great experience.
Wow. You and I, we've talked about this. I didn't come to appreciate all of the things that you said until I went through the life scale journey as I was writing that book. And that opened my eyes and my heart and my mind in ways that had been closed that I didn't know about before. And it's like you said, living your legacy. Thank you, Kathy, for sharing that with Hank and Hank with us. So let's jump into a couple of things that, to find that balance between this ad guy, this madman, to someone who gives back so graciously to the community, to students, and also to marketers who are still out there trying to figure it out. It's a whole different world now, for sure. Before I go into this question, though, I do want to take a moment to say again, thank you to the community and the audience for being part of our live show. Please do share with us where you're tuning in from. Share with us your questions, your comments, your observations. You are part of the show. We will feature them on screen, and John and I will be getting better at going back into the comments and responding to people post-show as well, so that this is an active community. So, Hank, you and I had already been focusing on how digital was changing the world in 2005, 2006, really with social starting to democratize the idea of marketing. But now also with the last year of just that acceleration in digital transformation, and I don't mean digital transformation in the buzzword sense. I mean like in us, we became digital first in everything that we were doing. How do you see the role of a marketer now changing in 2021 and beyond?
Well, first of all, you're right. We were early on that digital transformation, and I don't think either one of us back then, and I was learning from you, really saw where it was going to go and how important it was going to be. And what I say is the pandemic has basically just accelerated everything that's been going on in digital by 3 to 5 years. And what I think it's made marketing even more exciting and profound and important than it's ever been. And I really mean this. I've been in this game for a long time. I wish I was in my student seats right now. Man, could we really rock it a lot more than we have. It's the most exciting time I've ever seen. And there's 3 reasons why it is. One, first and foremost, we're finally living up to what we paid lip service to, that the consumer is in charge. We follow them. We're not the ones that are driving it. The consumer's driving it. Terrific, because that's where we should always have been. The second one is we live in glass houses in marketing today. There's no BS, what you say you have to do, and if you don't, you get called out for it, and you get rewarded and or punished for it appropriately. And then the third thing that I think makes it so important for marketers in marketing is that the culture of the company, which used to be behind walls and so on, is now part of the equity of companies and brands. And the marketing department is at the forefront, I think, of making sure that culture oozes out of a company. Simple little thing like today, where we've moved beyond segmentation and who the consumer is to creating these things called personas, which are very, very deep and different. And I just had a great session last night with my MBA class. And when we create those personas that take a deep dive into the who and the why and the behavior and motivation of the people we serve, it's our responsibility to make sure that they are infused in everyone in the company. So it takes that CMO role and really broadens it out. You used the term once, I remember, that stuck with me. They become the chief experience officer as opposed to the chief marketing officer. And it's really important. So the aspirational aspects of being in marketing and a CMO are really very powerful in the difference you can make. Coincidentally, the average tenure of the CMO today is the lowest in the C-suite. It's about 40 months. It started to go up and now it's starting to go down again. So there's a lot of turmoil there and change, but it is a fantastic business to be in because It is a force for good, period.
Hank, did you say 40?
40 months.
I just read something recently, and I was going to ask you about this, that I read 18 and that it had radically dove because the role of the CMO was becoming too great. In terms of, if you think about like why it's so exciting, is that everything about marketing is changing, but then you also bring in customer experience, and then you also add innovation in AI, automation, and all of these incredible arrays of technology that allow us to be better marketers, which was becoming just like way too much for one CMO to handle. So what, if you had to reimagine the role for now, and then John, this will be my last question. I'll throw it over to you. What Hank would you define for that existing CMO or that budding CMO? Like, what does that role need to be to break those records and thrive and survive and outlast everyone?
Yeah, well, just by the way, that's remember that I quoted was Spencer Stewart's study that they've done, and I'll send it to you just to maybe we can cross-check numbers. But I think you really have to take on the role that you are the inspirational person, but you're no longer about ads and commercials. You're about creating those experiences. So the budding CMOs today, if you don't have some kind of analytics in your DNA, you're not going to really go anywhere. You have to understand that, and the smart CMOs get that under their belt and then recognize that analytics and data, well, we have to essential in being a data-driven business models, but the role of the CMO is to take the insights out of that and motivate. And when CMOs get caught up in my database is bigger and better than yours, is when they fail. It is when the CMOs understand that data is there to better inform everything they do to touch and motivate their customer and be in service to them. And the other thing that CMOs have got to realize is, you mentioned they're the chief customer service officer as well, because the things that they use in social media are where you go as a consumer for that. And then the third part that they integrate into it is the whole sustainability and corporate purpose. It is very much integrated into that CMO function. And then you lay on top of that, there's we used to be responsible in marketing for the ROE, the return on engagement by consumers, but now more and more that's morphing into the return on investment as well. So all of that comes together and makes the job much harder and more exciting, but you really have to play totally different roles and recognize that you are. And just almost start from scratch in redefining that role.
Yeah, well said. John, over to you, my friend.
So I wanted to ask about the question of authenticity. We're in this very odd historical moment where we have two political machines that are marketing diametrically opposed views of reality. But that also extends to other domains as well. I had a really kind of hair-raising experience recently, which was Googling the term innovation consultant, which I guess Brian and I are kind of accused of being once in a while. And I got 227 million hits for that term. And, when we started out, there were a handful, and now there are thousands, tens of thousands of people who are, so differentiation is important. So how does authenticity, or the ability to convey authenticity, play into a world where everybody's trying to get their chunk of airtime and out authentic the next guy?
Yeah, the great question. That's one that I ponder a lot and done some reading on it and studying it. But one thing I'm going to do is I stopped using the word authenticity. Because I think it is one of those overused marketing hyped things. You either authentic or you ain't. You can't practice it. You can't try to be it. You can't do this. You either are or you're not. And Seth Godin had a term that I embraced, which was be sincere. Take authenticity and put sincerity in your mind. Be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, I really believe this. This is who we are as a company. And everything you do has got to be in service to that. One of the biggest areas of concern for me today is that whole area of purpose-driven marketing. It is a powerful force. It is something that is now integrated into brands, but it's a slippery slope. And I have a point of view that says purpose has got to be organically grow from a brand, or you adapt it to your brand. If it doesn't, it's just another appendage and an add-on of what's the woke meme of the moment. And I see much too much of that. So I'd have a point that says the way you get to your purpose is you're defining what your brand mission is. You have brand values that Jim Stengel discusses in his book. You have a clearly defined positioning statement. You have your brand voice and your tone and manner. Then once you're there, you then go and say, okay, what causes am I going to be behind? What's my purpose going to be? Because it's going to flow organically from me, rather than saying, this is trending today and I'm going to do it. It's okay. Sure. There are no bad causes. They're all good causes, but it just becomes gratuitous and an appendage. So I think it is one of the most powerful tools we have. And to your point, one of the most challenging. And just, give you a point of view that a lot of people don't agree with me on. I think that from a marketer's point of view, we have no business being in politics. We should be about policy, and we should be about what our values and how they're reflected. But going down on putting feet in different political camps, just I think diminishes the causes and diminishes the politics of it. There are a lot of people that don't agree with me about that.
Well, I understand what you're saying in terms of keeping a kind of high moral ground in society relative to the hurly-burly of politics. But there are thousands of people who are in the marketing end of politics. And, I guess maybe authenticity, let's set that word aside, but there's also the word truth. Mm-hmm. And, historically, I think one of the reasons people have been historically suspicious about marketing is because it's dressing anything up and selling it, right? And hopefully getting people to buy it. And, we see this in the political sphere. We see this in the trending sphere. I'm seeing it in the innovation consultant sphere. And I'm just wondering how the discipline of marketing, and I think we can call it a discipline, is going to address the issues of truthfulness in also a data-driven, algorithm-driven world where, statistics, in a sense, are going to replace let's not use the word authenticity, but sincerity or truthfulness as the criterion for making the purchase decision?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's three words that I always use when I say we have to work to in marketing. It's truth, transparency, and trust, and those three guideposts should guide everything you do. There is no substitute for the truth. Period. There isn't. A lie is a lie. A truth is a truth. In marketing, as I use the analogy sometimes, if I'm going out on a date, I want to show up as who I am, but I'll make sure I put on a clean shirt and I'll make sure I shave that day. But who I am is showing up. And I think marketers have, unfortunately today, tried to shade things where the person that's showing up at that consumer's door and asking for permission to come in isn't really them. It's someone they're dressing up the wrong
somebody
way.
Else. Yeah.
And that is bad. That will never win. It's like spam. You don't build a business on spam, and it catches up with you. It always does. I've always seen it. It catches up with you all the time.
Well, we'll see what happens in the midterm elections, and see if that gets worn out.
John, let me ask you a question, John.
Sure.
Why are we fixated from a marketing point of view? I'm not talking about a personal point of view on the midterm elections.
Why are we, or why am I?
No, just the world. Sometimes, putting it from the market. I understand it reflects it all, but what you have to do as a business person and a marketer is understand that is one element of what's going on. There's so much more that you have to do to be in service to a customer. So I sometimes get concerned about some of that we let that go too far to the forefront because we've been beat over the head with all of it, right or wrong. And I don't have any point of view about either one.
Hey, John, before you answer, I want to share a couple of stats because Yosh is backstage and this has the full ability to become an hour-long conversation. One thing is that, to balance both sides of the conversation, consumers our own Salesforce research shows that consumers say that trust has skyrocketed to the top of the list that they want in a brand, and so have values. And so I want to set the stage here. In fact, just in the last year, 61% of consumers reported stopping business with a brand whose values didn't align with theirs. So I wonder if in a world of intentional disinformation and divide, if we're not going to get it from our elected representatives in terms of truth, then it's going to have to come from somewhere. And John, I'll just kind of leave that over to you to respond.
The issue is there's no consumer reports for facts that relate to what's going on politically or socially. I mean, consumer reports can rate what a better loudspeaker is for your computer or something like that. But we're in the situation where truth has taken a backseat to marketing efficacy, and that's why, in a way, we have this equal but opposite, almost like Buridan's ass phenomenon, where you can't move. So I mean, it's a big question that we probably would need another half hour to unpack. I just want to ask one more question of Hank, because this is such a great opportunity. What do you know now that you didn't know when you were starting out that's reflected in the, let's say, the distilled essence or the wisdom that's coming through in your book, which I now just ordered on Amazon, by the way?
Before you answer that, can we also weave in Ken's question here as well? Because I think that they're going to complement each other. Which is basically, how are young professionals able to move in this? What advice do you have for students? Is the traditional education what they need? Is street smarts what they need? That especially as the world of marketing is changing so fast, what advice do you have for them?
Well, I can go on for a lot, but I'll try to make it quick. The things that I wish that I look at now is I never realized how important mentors were going to be in my life. And I think students And people starting out today don't look at it that way. They look at, gee, where am I going to get this job? Is it the brand name cool when I go into it, et cetera? Rather than adding to that equation is, am I going to be able to early on in my career latch on to and get mentors that are going to really keep me going on every stepping stone? And I really encourage students to really look for that and find that and put their hand up all the time and saying, how did you do that? Why did you do it? It's the gift that keeps on giving. And the important thing for students today is they have the opportunity to be reverse mentors, because the people that are hiring them are in their 40s, et cetera, and they're looking for them to teach them on how to use and manage these great digital tools. And the other thing that I did, and this may surprise you, is I didn't discover the importance of giving back and volunteering until later in my career. And I wish the heck I would have discovered it early. I'm on the board of the American Heart Association. I've been with them for 18 years now, and it's made me better at everything I do in business. So those are the two things that, aside from all the technical things that I put in to say to help rally themselves as people and grow as people and learn from that. And then the other thing, young people starting out, really, really, really look yourself in the mirror, find out who you are, and don't, find those mentors and go in and ask questions, ask and surround yourself with those mentors initially that are going to help you grow, and never be afraid to admit what you don't know. But, if you're going into marketing, make sure you have some analytics in your background. You need it, not because you have an analytics grad, but because that's going to enable you to really know your customer better and keep yourself focused on that North Star. Everything in marketing is focused on the North Star. And I think I borrowed this phrase from you, Brian, that I tell all my students: when you go in, and no matter whether you're going to do an analytics program, create an ad, or write an email, put in your mind this thought: what will my mobile customer think, feel, and do? And create everything with that in mind: the head, the heart, and the action that you want. So that's my advice to you.
Excellent.
That's a wonderful way to leave us, Hank. I always enjoy our time together. I do look forward to you and John spending more time together as well. It's one of the reasons why we do this show. So, Hank, I'll see you maybe next time in your classroom.
You will. You'll both be there. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this. Is
a pleasure to have you, Hank.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hank. Wonderful. Well, John, Yosh is backstage already, so maybe we should just jump right in there.
Sure. Well, let's bring him up, and I'll just set the stage. When I was teaching at Harvard Business School a number of years ago, there were these debates about what is entrepreneurship and who are entrepreneurs. And I remember having a hot disagreement with several of my colleagues who, and I quote, said, entrepreneurship doesn't have to do with personality of people. It has to do with situational phenomena. And of course, being somebody who had a clinical background and, was all about the drama of heroic people starting companies and embracing uncertainty and the possibility of failure, that was clearly an area of disagreement. Hank talked about the human side of things. And Yosh, the reason that I was so excited to have him on the show is because of something that hasn't even seen the light of day yet, which is that I understand he's working on a third book called The Startup Sutras, which are reflections on building gritty startups through the mindfulness tradition. So I really want to go there and unpack that. But let me just introduce Yosh by saying he's a serial entrepreneur. He's been involved in doing startups that have flown high and startups that maybe have flown a little less high, but he's witnessed the process of going from, a couple of people and I presume a pile of paper on his desk, which, I'm certainly familiar with, to hundreds of people and successful exits. He's working currently on an intelligent enterprise B2B location-aware warehouse management orchestration platform, leveraging 5G ultra wideband. So how's that for a headline for your pitch deck? And so he seems to be someone who, is enjoying a very full life. Welcome, Yosh. And I'd love to dive right into the book that you're writing, not to give away any of the punchlines, but why do you feel that building gritty startups and the mindfulness tradition are connected? And what's your connection to the mindfulness area?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. Following Hank, a professor at USC, and having y'all invite me, I had to check my email a couple times, and I had my 9-year-old read it for me just to make sure it was accurate. So it's truly an honor being in y'all's presence. It's awesome. So just kind of quick background on me, as you'd mentioned, and my latest startup, Fulfilled. That's a bit of a mouthful, but we are an intelligent warehouse management platform leveraging 5G ultra wideband. My business partner and I, Michael Pytel, have been together for 15 years. That's a whole sutra on its own, which actually I wrote recently. But, in my past startup, it was a company called Nimble. It was totally self-funded, bootstrapped. Mike and I started in 2009. It was two of us. We scaled it to, when we left, of over 300 people. Some nice size. It wasn't IBM, but we were at 50 million in annual revenue. And I think through that process, Michael and I, we learned a ton. We made a ton of mistakes. But I think one of the things that really was one of the greatest learning experience in the transformation was really more on the human aspect, the empathy, the vulnerability. And so much of that is founded in mindfulness tradition. And while my family, my wife and I, we practice meditation and yoga, etc., for years and years and years, the irony is that I never really integrated that into the business world. They were almost two separate worlds that never overlapped, which was really crazy because so much of my life is, and I'm no guru, I am no expert. I practice. That's why they call meditation and yoga a practice. I was never integrating that in. And it was only after, quite frankly, probably 5-6 years into Nimble, did we really start seeing that there were so many wonderful opportunities to bring different perspective of a mindfulness tradition to, quite frankly, help on the entrepreneurial journey. And I'll say one last thing and I'll stop, is that as an entrepreneur, and I'm in it right now, we're in a brand new, we're raising venture capital. We didn't do that before. So this is a whole new experience with the good and the bad. And, it was just so interesting to really try to bring in those traditions and to really build just a better entrepreneurial experience. And as opposed to being focused on revenue, now we were focused on the people. And quite frankly, by focusing on the people and our interaction and vulnerability, empathy, that really helped propel the business well past just a ruthless focus on revenue.
Right, and growth for its own sake. So let's unpack this a little bit more, because this is really interesting. I mean, for those of you out there that are not familiar with the term sutra, it refers to texts in Sanskrit that come from the Hindu tradition or Buddhist tradition or Jainist tradition, but they're kind of principles to live by. And I'm curious if you don't mind sharing a bit about what your meditation practice is, and then what some of the connections have been between the let's say the self-realization you've gained in the meditation practice and the self-realization you've gained in the entrepreneurial process. This is actually something I've thought a lot about as well. And I don't know if you're familiar with Albert Lowe's writing. Albert was he was a Zen abbot in Canada. and a very successful entrepreneur and strategy consultant who has written a couple of books on Zen in the world of work and kind of trying to bring these. There are a few books that have tried to bring, especially the Zen tradition and being an executive. I guess they didn't have entrepreneurs in the days when they were writing those books. So if you can just share a little bit more about your experience, I think we'd all be real curious. I mean, how did your mindfulness practice grow? What are some of the kind of links between the journey of self-realization in the one versus, or not versus, but and the entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I mean, my practice is really simple. I have a sitting practice that I do my best to sit. It's Vipassana, just focusing on my breath. I mean, there's a multitude, obviously, of different types of meditation practices, but for me, Vipassana really resonates. And I simply just sit, and I had, before any type of electronics, before I wake up early, before the day starts, I have 4 beautiful kids, an amazing wife. So our house is pretty much a circus. And, being able to start the day with just some quiet time. And for me, just to be able to sit and really do my best, not to try to think, but just try to be. I start my day off that way. And without question, the days where I have an opportunity to do that, or I make the opportunity to do that versus the days that I don't, there is a direct correlation between how I interact with the world. And so, in terms of the sutras, and I this is my 3rd book. The other 2 books were, Brian, I'm not in the Salesforce world. I was in the SAP world for 20 plus years, integrated often with Salesforce. So in LinkedIn, I write these sutras where it's trying to take some experience, whether positive or negative, that I've experienced over my entrepreneurial journey, for lack of a better word, to try to share in terms of nuggets on what I've learned and how I interacted. And so they're on LinkedIn. I also have a website, startupsutras.life, where I post those sutras. And really, these sutras are that, as you mentioned, that meshing of the entrepreneurial journey and different experiences, real tactical. I mean, Hank spoke a lot about marketing, branding, marketing, sales, go to market, leadership, empathy, etc. And then how from how mindfulness tradition, we can look at these perhaps through a different lens. And so, it's just some sutras for me that are really core to who I am, are peer support. So finding a group to be able to have a trusted network of confidential shoulders to lean on, especially from the entrepreneurial experience. I'm part of a business network called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. It's dynamite. I mean, for me, it's been absolutely life-changing. There's other wonderful organizations out there like Vistage or EO or what have you. You can even create your own. But for me, that peer support and having almost that temple, if you will, of folks around that are going through similar yet also different experiences provides an opportunity to have deeper reflection, et cetera. So yeah, so online right now are a couple of them, and some of them are super tactical and maybe be more bend more towards entrepreneurship versus mindfulness, and some vice versa. So,
well, what you said about temple and community is very resonant with how meditation practice is done in the world of Zen or the world of the Hindu tradition, which is, you can do it on your own, but doing it in a community and doing it in a way that is connected to others often amplifies the experience of being clear and moving forward. I'm curious, a lot of mindfulness practice is about situating yourself in the present and not, we tend to either focus on the past and regret or the future and get anxious. But if we are in the moment, there's no negative affect. Really, it's just kind of doing the thing that's in front of you. And I wonder if that's a thought that's kind of sustained you, because we know that being an entrepreneur can be really tough. Yeah, a lot of regret and a lot of anxiety, I guess we could say.
I mean, that is complete bullseye. And in terms of the Buddhist tradition of the middle way, and not having these high highs or these low lows, I couldn't think of a better comparison to the entrepreneurial experience, where we're raising money and super excited, and we feel like this is going to happen, and then the next day they say, sorry, that's not in, and we're are in the fetal position. Kids are asking what's going on. So yeah, absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
And do you what are your thoughts about bringing some of these ideas more firmly into the mainstream? I mean, I related my little Harvard Business School anecdote about how some of the academicians said, well, the human equation isn't really relevant in entrepreneurship because it's primarily a situational phenomenon. I mean, they had great, kind of 2x2 matrices and things like that. But I think we would agree that the human element is the hardest to teach, but probably in a sense the most important. And what are your thoughts about kind of injecting this more into the mainstream?
I think we're actually finding that a lot more is being injected into the mainstream, not just even from an entrepreneurial perspective, but just in terms of business world in general. I think we're becoming a lot more aware, and the emotional piece is so much more prevalent and important and part of the fabric of business today than it probably was, fill in the blank 20 years ago, et cetera. And now it's especially also with, I'm close to 50. And the way that, when we grew Nimble to 300 plus people, and we were hiring millennials versus, folks my age, definitely the perspective and the value system and the priorities were very different. And so much was more on, not necessarily grinding it out and full commitment always to the business, but it was more on work-life balance and how do you connect to the ethos of the business itself and priorities of the business. And, Hank had mentioned a bit before, in terms of, cause, if you will, and how business or marketing connects to cause. We're a software, we're a B2B software warehouse management orchestration platform. Like, we're not curing cancer. However, how we are looking at this and how we have, a value system of who we hire, how we mentor, how we have our employees have time for philanthropic types of causes that are important for them on work time. I mean, again, we're not running an orphanage. I'm a full-on capitalist. That being said, these are things that are important. So to answer your question, I think that it is getting much more weaved into the fabric of business, whether entrepreneurial or, enterprise.
Well, there's a Buddhist saying or sutra, I guess, that says that one's efforts will not cease until all beings have been liberated. And that's the kind of altruism behind that form of practice. But it's also, as you say, showing up a lot more in terms of the double or triple bottom line, or however you want to describe it, that your business and your life have to be purposeful, or, they're not really worth living. There was a question in the comments about the author I mentioned. It's Albert Low, L-O-W, who again was a noted management consultant and a business executive, but also a practitioner of Zen at a quite high level. I think he was the head of the Zen community in Toronto for a number of years. So, he knew his stuff. And most of his books were about a classic Zen practice as opposed to, how to do the dance in terms of business. So, well, how's it going, in terms of the current business?
Thank you. Thank you for asking. Yeah. In terms of authors, one other outside of Albert, I'm based in Colorado. I'm based in Denver. I'm very close to the Republic of Boulder. And so Boulder has its own energy and vibe, if you will, very similar to the Bay. There is the whole host of VCs there, and there is very much a mindfulness pocket within the Boulder community. Brad Feld is a luminary, not only within Colorado, but globally. And one of his teachers who he speaks a lot with is Jerry Colonna. I don't know if you're familiar with Jerry Colonna, and he has a whole program called Reboot, and it's reboot.io. I've been on for one of my retreats. We brought in the Reboot folks, and it was very much from a deep dive into oneself, and those depends upon kind of facilitation and such. Some of it can be kind of maybe not bullseye, if you will. Okay. This one was dynamite. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, just for the audience out there, the Reboot folks, they have podcasts, and much of it is weaving in the mindfulness tradition into often entrepreneurial or founder type world. Specific to Fulfilled, I mean, we're grinding, right? It's full on grinding, and I'm using new muscles, or I'm using old muscles that I haven't used in 12 plus years. Back in the Nimble days and previous, it was Mike and I, and we were doing everything. And then we were able to scale and be able to bring in folks better than us to do all the other things. And we were able to delegate. Now we're a team of 6, and we're building our MVP. We're raising money. We're working on customer acquisition. And so, in terms of trying to be in the present moment and not fret about the future and remain grounded and present, it is it's work. It's work.
It's what my friend Pitch Johnson calls the entrepreneurial scramble. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Brian, who's been, I can sense there's a little kind of combustion going on in his brain here. So
well, I'm also bringing Gregarious up, who is much more than our producer and also longtime friend. Gregarious is a serial entrepreneur, serial founder, and Yosh, he's in Denver as well. And Gregarious and I used to literally run around the Web 1 and Web 2 scenes in San Francisco, and he's recently moved there to help spur the same type of community that we had in Silicon Valley. So number one, you guys need to connect in the real world, but also Gregarious, I wanted to ask you, and you, Yosh. I went through this whole process of using Eastern philosophies and wisdom in a lot of this my way in a world that is incredibly distracted, and also the pressure of trying to excel in a world where an average starter home starts at $1 million. The pressure of having to build and create some semblance of success is very high, and the standards for that success, though, are very old. Have a house, have kids, have a couple cars, get some hobbies, and as you talked earlier about the practice of these techniques in order to ground yourself, root yourself, and bring out the best of yourself. I want to ask you, Yosh and Gregarious, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. It's almost impossible when you have those demands on you, and that need to make things happen, and the pressure that you feel from your partners or your customers or your employees. I couldn't break away to find that time to get balance and to invest in myself. So Yosh, how do you do that in gregarious? You've been there a million times. We put in 20-hour days in, at least. How do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go quickly because I'd love to hear what Gregarious has to say. And Gregarious, would love to meet you outside
sure.
of the webcast. I think honestly, it's an issue of simply making the time and having it as a priority. I was writing a column for something recently, and there is always enough time, just based upon how you prioritize. So if it means that for me, before the kids get to school, and I take the kids to school every day, and we have to get them ready at 7, and there's 4 of them, and it's like herding cats, as you can imagine. I got to get up at 5, and that means that I need to make the time in order to have my own time, either to be able to work out and or sit and or et cetera. So that's how I approach it.
Yeah, I agree. And Brian, I would probably say I spent a lot of time thinking about this topic as well. If odd story, I became a bodybuilder to prove to other entrepreneurs that you can actually still do other things than just be sort of an entrepreneur. But I think about it in two systems really. One is of debts and the other is of guilt, right? And I think what happens is fundamentally the guilt, the debt side is probably the one that's the more obvious, right? Because and to Yosh's point about time, really any time you spend in one place creates a debt of time in another place, right? And so, for example, if we decide or we need to be heads down and focused on our work for now, right? It may mean sacrificing some time with our kids, with our family, with our partners, may sacrifice some of the fun that we'd like to have, right? Those are debts. But the philosophy I have is that the only way to move forward is to be cognizant of the debt as opposed to just ignoring it, right? And so I was literally telling this yesterday to another entrepreneur that it seems like the only way to do things is the way to do things, right? Like is to only do that thing. And if instead in beforehand you say, I know I'm not going to go to the gym right now because I need to work on this. It's very different than pretending that the gym didn't exist, right? It's very different than not acknowledging that you are intentionally sort of putting off investing in your health or whatever it may be. And so those debts accrue, right? And so what happens is eventually we have to settle those debts or work towards paying them down, which is where the guilt comes in, right? Because the thing that actually holds us back is the guilt. That's the quicksand, right? Because, much like anyone who's ever gotten into credit card debt or tax debt or whatever debt you may have, once you get to a certain point, it just becomes insurmountable and you dive deeper into it, right? Like you try to buy your way through the other end of it, right? So I've heard founders, for example, say I'm going to make it up to my kids as soon as I sell this company. I was like, bullshit. 1, you probably aren't going to sell the company. And 2, you can't make it up to your kids, right? Like you don't get that time back, right? Like you either have that time or you don't have it. And you can choose to not prioritize it, but don't expect them to have to forgive you for it either, right? And so I think it's really these two systems that feed each other, right? Like where we intentionally ignore the hidden costs of doing things that we choose to do, right? And then we become and continuously carry guilt about the fact that we know we're ignoring these other things, right? And so as with everything, the more we are cognizant and measure those things, become aware of those things, the more we can solve for them, right?
Sounds like you've got a book to write, Greg.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Or at least a couple of sutras.
The book is, the working title of the book has always been Minimum Viable Person, because it's like a product manager's guide to life. And that's why the debt is actually an abstract of product debt, technical debt, other constructs that exist in the product world. The stakeholders are all the people in your life that you actually need to service and fulfill.
Well,
so I've been working on it. Just haven't had a lot
You've
of
given
time.
the idea away now, so you better hurry up.
Yeah, right. Everybody's heard it out there.
Hey, so Yosh, with the limited time we have left, I'd love to hear from you what's been some of the greatest challenges that you've faced, even though you've practiced for many years with this work from anywhere world that we've had to live in over the last year. What new things arose that you didn't see, and what did you have to practice your way through? I can tell you mine was the chaos of having little kids at home, not traveling the way I used to, and having to learn how to reconstruct my day so that I was with them when I needed to be, helping out when I could, but also getting my work done. And it took it took a lot of work.
Well, I think for me, I mean, similar for sure. I mean, the obvious would be is in terms of the work from home and just in terms of the tactical, that was challenging. I think probably at a more at a more impactful level, my wife is also an entrepreneur.
Oh wow!
And she has just started, not just started, several years ago, a spiritually inspired fine jewelry line called Orly Marcel. And it's mantras and mandalas and pendants and sacred symbols. It's beautiful, beautiful. And she comes from a design and a yoga background, and now she's trying to mesh those two together. And so, quite frankly, which has been a beautiful challenge in our 15-year marriage, in a positive way, has been that Orly has been grinding at building a wholesale / direct-to-consumer fine jewelry business, which requires a whole set of muscles that, quite frankly, neither one of us have. And so in my world of enterprise software, we can always learn more. But I feel like, I got a rhythm and I understand what the motion looks like. I know how to build a business, blah, blah, blah. But in terms of, tactically with her Shopify backed website and integrating with Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest and blah, 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 like I'm not the expert there. And so in this past year, she's had incredible momentum and it's been a grind. And so to have 2 startups in our household with 4 young kids during COVID has been a major challenge to us individually, as a couple, and as a family.
Yeah. Gregarious, I'm sure that sounds familiar.
I only have one, and that was plenty.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I guess, guys, we're out of time. John, I'll throw it over to you to close this out with Yosh.
Well, I guess it remains for us to study some sutras and kind of compare our experiences with yours. And I'm really pleased that we had this kind of entrepreneur as human and spiritual inquirer and journeyer theme throughout the hour. Sometimes these juxtapositions are great and happen spontaneously. And I think today was a great example of that. So wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yosh.
Thank you so much for having me.
And
Absolutely.
Gregarious, Yosh, make sure you guys connect in the real world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, with that said, John, that brings us to a close of another action-packed episode.
Indeed.
Before we say goodbye, I do want to remind you that we do have a newsletter, and we have a very special resource who's going to be helping us launch that newsletter here shortly. So please do subscribe. Please do stay connected with us. Make sure that you're chatting with us in the comments. We do engage with those as well. We read every single one, even if we don't get them displayed on the show. So once again, thank you, John.
We'll play us out.
All right, play us out.